So today we're getting into a book on mixed martial arts that came out before the first UFC event. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts subjects. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book Shoot Wrestling, Shooto Training Guide, Volume 1. This is not part of a series, this is Volume 1 of 1. The book originally came out in 1992 and the author is Yori Nakamura. Now, Mr. Nakamura brought shoot wrestling to the United States. He actually wanted to train at the Inosanto Academy and learn Jeet Kune Do. He also learned other arts like Silat, but he is primarily known for bringing the art of Shooto to the US. The beginning of the book gives us a brief history of Shooto from the perspective of its founder, who is Satoru Sayama. Shooto is a combination of arts like Muay Thai, Judo, catch wrestling, and Sambo. We also get to hear a little bit of Mr. Nakamura's journey from being one of the first students of Shooto to bringing it to the United States and teaching some of Bruce Lee's students like Dan Inosanto and Richard Bustillo. After that, we get some general concepts. We begin with the 5 ranges, and these basically come down to everything from being too far away to hit to being chest to chest, which he describes as no distance. And in between that, you have the 3 long, intermediate, and short range where you can execute various striking techniques. He also goes over 5 ground positions. One of those is called the overturn position, which today we might regard as being an open guard position. He notes that it's what happens after one gets taken down. He also has a top position, no further description, quarter position where one is on the elbows and knees, half standing position where one is on one or both knees, as well as the supine position where one is trapped underneath one's opponent. The next section is on form, so this is more on stance mostly. So the Shooto stance is described as having a low center of gravity but also being upright. He contrasts this with the upright kickboxing stance, although from the photographs there doesn't really seem to be much of a difference between them. He also contrasts this with a standard boxing stance, which is more low and crouched. He also includes a wrestling stance, which is very squared up. He notes that this is not used in striking range. Basically, the leg position looks like a deep horse stance, but it is something that you will find when you get into clinch positions. And he also includes the neck bridge. He demonstrates his strength in the neck bridge by having 2 people sit on top of him as he is bridging. Don't try that at home, kids. When we start getting into offensive techniques, we get some basic punches, very much along the lines of the basic boxing punches, although their variation of the uppercut is a long-range, almost straight-armed punch. You notice that this is because when shooters get in close, they're probably going to go for a takedown. So I guess there's no place for like the standard short uppercut. He will also note that they prefer to use a corkscrew kick. This is a variation of the round kick where the knee is thrust out first as if you were going to do a thrusting kick, and then you turn the hips over and get the last arc at the end of the kick. After that, we get a brief section on throws, and this basically comes down to doing uchikomi, which is fitting in other words, a preparation for a throw, and he demonstrates one for a double leg takedown and one for a head and arm throw. After that is a rather extensive section on lock flows, and that's sort of what Shooto is known for, is beginning with one lock and flowing through a sequence of locks. In this case, it's a total of 22 locks, but he also includes variations of them. So you're probably getting around 30 submissions total with this, if you include the variations as separate submissions. These are given a little bit of detail. I wouldn't say so much as far as the mechanics go, although that does show up a little bit. But he will point out, well, this move relies more on strength as opposed to the gravity of the body, things like that. Most of these are based on I'm going for this particular lock and my opponent reacts in a certain way, which causes me to look for a different finish for this or move on to a different submission. Finally, the book ends with a techniques section. That's the terminology that they decided to go with. Basically, what this amounts to is a series of combinations that begin with standing strikes and end with grounded submissions. We get a wide variety of both strikes and submissions in here, including many things that were not previously covered in the book. I think some of these are a little bit fanciful. For instance, there's one sequence where the defender avoids a low kick by doing a jump spinning back kick. All right, dude. At the same time, I think that this does sort of present us with an idea of what Shooto was meant to look like, and this is something that we would see in a lot of the demos at the time. As far as the pros go, I think one thing that it does well is explaining why one is performing a move in a certain way, for instance, the long uppercut, and of course, the various locks and chokes in the lock flow series. You're doing this if your opponent defends this way, for instance. So decently detailed for a relatively short book. We've been joined by my cat Harper. As far as the cons go, as I pointed out, there are plenty of things in the technique section toward the end of the book that aren't previously covered. That leads me to believe that perhaps that section was meant to be more demonstrable as opposed to instructive. Hello, baby. It does a poor job if one is meant to learn what is going on from those pictures because, how am I supposed to know how to do this move if you didn't cover it previously? I also think the takedown section in particular is rather short. Think of the number of takedowns and throws and trips that are found through all the martial arts, and he decided to show two. They're not bad ones. They are two of the most used ones, but it's only two. And honestly, the book itself is short overall. It clocks in at just over 50 pages. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, it's volume 1 of 1. They intended to do more, I assume, but never got around to it. Not sure why. I would love to actually get a deep dive into the Shooto curriculum. I love the idea of lock flows. As far as recommendations go, if you can find this, I was fortunate enough to find it on PDF. If you can find this, I think it's a good snapshot of what mixed martial arts looked like before it was mixed martial arts. The Japanese fighters in the early days of MMA in the 90s, in a lot of ways, were ahead of the curve because they were combining striking and grappling in a way that most other fighters were not. And of course, their unconventional submissions and the idea of lock flows definitely helped some of them in those early days. I also think that from a general perspective, I like the idea of lock flows. I'm open to unconventional submissions. I think having the entirety of their first submission combination on here is good for people who are interested in submissions. You might find something in there that you can try out. Personally, I do tend to like this particular flavor of grappling, sort of the catch/shoot wrestling. But outside of that, as an historical curiosity and as maybe having some ideas for some unconventional techniques, that's about the extent of it, I think. Although, if you practice Shooto, I guess this still applies. I know Eric Paulson's combat submission wrestling took a lot from Shooto, including the lock flows. So if you are new to those, perhaps this would be a decent study guide for beginners. Anyway, that's all I have for this week. Thank you for following along with me. Thank you for indulging my cat for being here. She's a good girl. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. I'm going to put a link to that in the description. And that's all I got. Thanks, and I'll see you later.